Because every week we see people like us, you and I, gathered in spaces like this. And I mean, we have conversations about the Bible, about Jesus, about God, but we don't really know what it means to be a true follower of Jesus. And through this series, that's the question that we're trying to answer. Now, the first week we went through this series, we started this series and we said, really, the thing that Jesus Christ is inviting us to is that there's a big invitation that we have, and that is come as you are. And this is open to anyone and everyone. No one is disqualified from this. And that's what we say, that come as you are. That's the first week. You know, it doesn't matter what you did last night, this morning. It doesn't matter what your past is like. Come as you are. Then we talked about, you know, now that you've come, now that you've been invited and you've accepted Jesus' invitation, what next? You know, and the thing that we said is that take the next steps. You know, take the next steps in your following Jesus. And it could be, you know, different things, because it's not just about, we're not following a blind faith. You know, but Jesus has already laid out the path for us, and that's what we need to do. So it's about taking little steps in different areas of our lives. And we talked about these steps. I gave us some examples. These are not the only ones, but it's sort of a guide on what we need to do. And the first one that we talked about is just the step of information. Some of us are in, you know, you're in seasons of your life where in certain areas you're sort of seeking information, you're learning, you're listening to God. You know, you just want to find out, you know, what is God saying about this particular situation. Maybe you've lost a loved one, or you've lost a job, or maybe you're in the place where you're finding a spouse and you're trying to listen. You know, what is God telling me in this situation? Then the other step was a step of inconvenience. Some of us have been in a comfort zone for a very long time. And the thing that we discovered is that there will come a time when you'll have to deny yourself, because that's what following Jesus is about. You know, where you have to deny yourself. And it is inconveniencing for some of us because we know what we want. We know the plans that we have for our future. You know, but we don't want the plans that God has for our future, because sometimes it becomes inconveniencing. For some of us, maybe coming to church every Sunday is inconveniencing. You're not used to this kind of life, or going to a life group, you know, or even coming to do Mizizi Ondoa. That's inconveniencing for you. But what we say is that you'll have to come out of your comfort zone. Then there was also the step of invitation. Others of us need to get to the place where we invite Jesus in certain areas of our life. We invite Jesus in our day-to-day living, where whatever it is that you're doing, whether it's in your relationship, whether it's in your workspace, whether it's in the neighborhood, you invite Jesus into those spaces through our communication with him, through our prayers, not just those tick-the-box prayers in the morning where you're like, you know, God bless my day, amen. No. It's one of those where you engage in conversation with God and pour out your heart to him. Then we also talked about surrender. Now, let me say this, the step of surrender. Let me say that this is not about ranks. That, you know, if you're at the place of information, or you're at the place of surrender, you know, surrender, you're more mightier than these other people. No. It could also be that you find yourself that different areas of your life are in different steps. You might find that in your relationship, you're at a place of surrender, but at your workplace, you're at a place where you're inviting God. So it's just a matter of realizing, you know, where am I when it comes to my marriage? Where am I when it comes to my schooling? And what do I need to do? What is the next step that I need to take? You know, those little steps are what following Jesus is about. Then last week, we learned that following Jesus will cost you self, right? We say that we have to deny, for you to be whoever, in fact, Jesus says this, whoever chooses to be my follower, they must deny themselves. And I say that you will find that there are times in your life, there are seasons in your life, there are moments when what you want for yourself and what Jesus wants for you are different. And it's in those moments that you have to say no to you and say yes to Jesus. Because you can't trust yourself. You can't trust yourself in this, because you don't even know where you're going. Yourself doesn't even know where it's leading you. You don't even know what's going to happen tomorrow. So why should you trust yourself? And yet Jesus has called you to something that is far much greater. So that's what we talked about, and we've been talking about as we are trying to answer this question. What does it mean to be a follower of Jesus? Now we're coming to the final part, and as we have seen since we started this series, Jesus has been moving from town to town. And he's doing great things. You know, he's calling his disciples, and he was also becoming more and more famous. Many more people are finding out about Jesus, and they know him, and they're getting excited. He's now the person probably with the largest following. He's literally trending at this time. And everywhere he goes, there are multitudes of people following him. I mean, the sick are getting healed. Miracles are happening. Some amazing stuff. He's teaching profound things. And Jesus is the guy that everyone wants to associate themselves with. So this is the season that we are in. But the reality is this. most of these people were following him for all the wrong reasons. And as we're going to see in today's message, as we saw last week, Jesus rebuking Peter because Peter was more concerned about, his own selfish interest. And I believe the rest of the disciples were more concerned about themselves than what God wanted to do through them or even in them. And this was also a representation of many followers back then, but even today, many of them were not true to him. They were after his miracles. They were after the good things that Jesus was offering. And some of those things were great. Now, but as the saying goes, every good thing comes to an end. I don't even know whether that's a good thing, but you know what? As we're going to see today, many of his followers did the inevitable and they stopped following Jesus when things got hard for them. And this is such a relevant message to each of us. It is so relevant and a perfect ending to our series, but it is not the end of our conversation. And this is what I'll say, because today I want to engage us into a conversation that will sort of help us when we encounter times that are difficult. I mean, we're going into a new month. We're going into the year 2018, a conversation that will help us in those moments. Those moments when you want to say enough is enough with this following Jesus stuff. Those moments when you want to say, I quit. I don't want to follow Jesus anymore. Because many of us have been in those spaces when you go through this season in life. And all of us will at some point, or if you haven't already, I want you to remember what we are going to talk about today. So if you would, please pen it down somewhere. And keep coming back to this conversation that we will have today. But also the 3 other messages that we've shared. Go on YouTube and keep this conversation front and center. Because it will help you for those moments that you want to quit on following Jesus. Then hopefully we might be successful in becoming true followers of Jesus. Today I want to talk and sort of take us to the Gospel of John. Now I've done this intentionally where every week I've taken a passage from each of the different accounts of Jesus. We began with Matthew, I think we went to Luke, Mark, and now John. Now the reason why I do this is I just want to show us how this story of Jesus is so amazingly true, believable, and beautiful. That 4 different accounts talking about the same person, but they complement each other. Now, John was one of his closest disciples. So John was there. John saw everything that happened and he wrote it down. And in chapter 6, which is for me one of those that I'll probably say one of the epic chapters. When you read chapter 6, it's such a long chapter. And I'm going to sort of share bits and pieces of the story. But my hope is that you'll enjoy the story so much you can go back and read about it. But chapter 6 has 71 verses. And it's one of those amazing chapters. And John takes us to a conversation, or he captures a conversation that will help us and helped his disciple, but also will help us in those I quit moments. But let me sort of give you a backstory to this. Huge crowds were attracted to the miracles of Jesus, and they kept following him wherever he went. And one of these days, we find that Jesus was walking up the hill with his disciples, and they get to a place where they want to rest, and he turns around and he sees this multitude of people. I mean, there were so many. John approximates for them to be about 5,000 men, not including the women and the children in that number. And of course, Jesus looks at them and he's moved, he's compassionate towards them. And he's like, we need to feed these guys because they've been following me. I don't know for how long they had been following him. We need to feed them. And Andrew, who's one of the disciples of Jesus, says, I don't even know why he says this, but he's like, there's a young boy here with 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. Now, probably he had seen Jesus do amazing stuff, miracles, and he believed that somehow this guy might be able to come up with something. But anyway, Jesus orders for them to bring the loaves and the fish, but also orders the disciples to get the people to sit down. And he gives thanks, for the fish and the loaves, and bang, they have enough food to feed everyone. And we are told that later on, they collected 12 baskets full of leftovers. It was so amazing that everyone ate to their fill. These guys were stoked. They were excited. They even started exclaiming that this must be the prophet that we were waiting for, the one who's supposed to be the king of the Jews. And Jesus Christ, knowing very well the hearts and minds of men, decided, he knew that these guys, they wanted to force him to become the king. They knew what was in their minds. He slipped away into the hill and he went somewhere alone. The disciples were left there. But then what happened is that the disciples, when darkness fell, when darkness was falling, they decided that they're going to go cross the lake and go over to the other side. So they got onto their boat, left the other people, the other followers there, got onto their boat, and we are told why they left Jesus, I have no idea. But we are told when they were, they had just rowed probably 6 kilometers in, what happened is that the wind became strong and the waters were splashing the boat. Now, don't think of this boat as a yacht. Okay? Think of it like a canoe. You know that small thing, just probably a slightly bigger canoe. So this is not a yacht. It's not like they are covered. So you can imagine with the waters in the sea just splashing this boat, almost the point of them being tossed out of the boat. And then, check this out. They saw a man walking on water. Now, I don't know about you, but first of all, when there's darkness, that's one. And then number two, when you're walking on water in the middle of the sea, I don't know about you, but you know what? I'd rather even drown. Because I don't want to encounter this. I don't even know what is coming my way. But Jesus Christ goes ahead and says, it is I, do not be afraid. Now, even that, it is I. I'm like, first of all, it's almost a ghost. You're like, am I dreaming? And then you hear, it is I. Let me stop there because some of you will have nightmares tonight. But anyway, so he says it is I. But I think these guys had spent so much time with God, with Jesus, that they knew his voice. So they invited him on board, and we're told that immediately they found themselves on the other side. Now, remember the guys that we left on the hill, the guys who were fed, the 5,000 men plus. They wake up in the morning and they discover that Jesus and his disciples are no longer there. So what do? They know that he's gone to a place called Capernaum. Now, Capernaum was the other side of the lake. And what do? They get onto their own boats and go chasing and looking after Jesus, out for Jesus. Now, they get to the other side and they find out Jesus was teaching in the synagogue. They show up and Jesus begins to rebuke them. And the reason he's rebuking them, he knows very well that you guys, you're not truly and sincerely following me. In fact, you're after your own things because you know that I fed you bread. That's the reason why you're following me. You don't even understand what happened at the hill. You don't understand the miracle that God was doing at the hill. You are after me because that I fed you bread. That's the reason why you're following me. And you need to stop chasing after mere provision. Go after what is eternal. And he keeps having this conversation. Seek after me and believe that God has sent me from heaven to give you eternal life. And then see what happens at verse 30. He says, so they asked him, if you can just put verse 30. So they asked him, what sign? Now, guys, remember, Jesus Christ on the other side of the lake has fed them with 5 fish and 2 loaves. And then they go ahead to ask him, what sign then will you give that we may see it and believe you? What sign? And then just hold on. They go ahead to say, what will you do? Our ancestors ate the manna in the wilderness, as it is written, he, referring to God, gave them bread from heaven to eat. Now, if you're not very familiar with this story, hundreds of years before this time with Jesus, the children of Israel were being delivered from captivity in Egypt, and they're being delivered to their promised land in Canaan. And while they were in the wilderness for many years, God provided for them food in the form of manna. And this was bread from heaven. So the guys were like, you know what? You have fed us. And that was awesome. But we want you to bless us and give us more of this bread every single day. So they always used to try and compare Jesus Christ to the old prophets. That's what these guys were doing over here. And I'm like, after all that Jesus had done, he had just fed these guys bread to their fill. And they were still asking for a sign. Does that sound ridiculous? But isn't that how we relate with Jesus? Always asking Jesus for a sign. Oh, Jesus, give me a sign about this. Oh, Jesus, let me know. Show me a sign. I need to know whether this is you about this particular situation. We get to the place even you come and you listen to a message like this, and then you walk out and you're like, God, please show me whether this is truly your message. I want to know whether this is really you speaking to me. Don't we do that? We are always asking Jesus for a sign. Give me a sign for this, give me a sign for that. But I love how Jesus responds, because it's like, you guys are so fixated in this bread story, so let's talk bread. So he says this, I am the bread of life. You guys, you're so fixated on this. there are moments in our lives that we are so fixated on one particular thing, like if God, you don't provide this for me, then I don't believe that you're there or you exist. And he's like, okay, so let me come to where you guys are. I am the bread of life. And then he goes ahead to say, your ancestors ate the manna in the wilderness, yet they died. In other words, he's saying, so fine, you're trying to compare me with what happened in the past. That's fine. God provided for them food, and he even provided for them daily. But what they were being given was physical and temporal, that they died. But here is the bread, referring to himself. Here is the bread that comes down from heaven, which anyone, again, back to the point of come as you are, anyone is invited. Anyone may eat and not die. And I love this part of the story. I love this part of the story. And he's like, Jesus is like, you want a sign? You want a sign? I am the sign. I am the living bread that came down from heaven. Whoever eats this bread will live forever. You guys want bread? I am the living bread. Whoever eats this bread, whoever eats me will live forever. And you want a sign? I am the sign. I am the living bread. But of course, what do you expect that these guys will do? No, they started grumbling among themselves. In fact, some of them even started shouting and they say, but we know your father and your mother. How do you say that you've come from heaven? Imagine if it was in Nairobi. Sinule budake ni Jose Wambao. Alafu madhake si ule Maria ule wa church. So, anawezaje tuambia ametoka binguni? That's what these guys were saying. They're like, how can you say that you've come from heaven? And yet we know your father. And we know your mother. So whatever it is that you're saying is not believable. Then he says something that throws them off. He says, this bread is my flesh, which I will give for the life of the world. And now, guys, the sermon just takes a different turn and it's about to get weird. Are you ready? This is what he says. Let's go to the next part. Then, of course, they argued amongst themselves. Now, just go to the next verse 53. It says, Jesus said to them, very truly I tell you, unless, watch these words, you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you have no life in you. Whoever eats my flesh and drinks my blood has eternal life, and I will raise them up at the last day. For my flesh is real food, and my blood is real. Whoever eats my and drinks my remains in me, and I in them. Just as the living Father sent me, and I live because of the Father, so the one who will live because of this is the bread that came down from heaven. Your ancestors ate manna and died. I hope it's going to come. But whoever, that's what it says, but whoever feeds on me will live because of me. This is the bread that came down from heaven. Your ancestors ate manna and died, but whoever feeds on this bread will live forever. What an awkward conversation. Jesus, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? All this eating you and drinking you stuff. This was a cannibalistic idea. Guys, let me tell you, this was actually, it was so repugnant in the culture at that time. In fact, the religious leaders would have annihilated Jesus at that moment if they had him say those things. It was so offensive to them. And of course, we're told in verse 60, on hearing this, many of his disciples said, this is a hard teaching. It is hard. Who can accept it? Who can accept this thing of eating and drinking, eating flesh and drinking blood? Who can accept it? Jesus, this is hard. We are not used to this. And we are already finding it hard to believe that you came from heaven. Now you want us to have you for dinner. It is impossible. Eat your flesh? We don't get it. On our side of town, we don't eat each other. We eat food, bread. So how is eating you going to give us life? Like we don't even understand what you're saying. This is hard, Jesus. We don't understand. Now, for the sake of this conversation, because I don't want to lose you, and I would love for you to go back and read this passage because you'll understand. Jesus was talking about his life and our life becoming one. That's the genesis. That's like the gist of this conversation. And it's as if he's saying, feed on what I give you. It guarantees you eternal life. You see, you're after perishable things that will waste away in your body. That's what you're going for. You're selfishly thinking about your stomachs. You're selfishly thinking about your ambitions. Don't waste your life on that. Don't waste your life on those things that will perish. Focus on something that is far much greater and eternal, which is from your Father in heaven. But this was a hard concept for the people, the followers, the crowd to understand. And it is also a hard concept for many of us in our generation to also understand. And it was almost inevitable, because we're told in verse 66, from this time, many of his disciples turned back and no longer followed him. We don't understand Jesus. I don't understand. Give me something that I will understand and I will follow you. It doesn't make sense to me. So because it doesn't make sense to me, this is where we part ways. And in that moment, when most people were departing from Jesus, people who probably had followed him for days, people who were praising him for the things that he had done, they were exalting him as their king, Jesus Christ, knowing the hearts and minds of men, turns to his disciples and he says, you do not want to live too, do you? He turns to his disciples. They're probably standing right there next to him. And friends, even as this question is there are going to be days where all of us are going to think about stopping to follow Jesus, if you haven't already. This is something that I want you to understand. You see, we don't stop following Jesus because we don't believe in him. We don't stop following Jesus because we've gotten to the place where we don't, for us, maybe the thing is that we don't believe in him or that he's the Son of God. We stop following Jesus because it has become difficult, because it has become inconveniencing, or because we're in an environment where it doesn't matter anymore what you believe. Let me give you a few examples. You lost a loved one. It has been difficult for you to understand your emotions or what is going on. It is not that you don't believe in Jesus, but it is too difficult for you to understand why something like this could happen to you. So what do? You quit following Jesus. You're married. And it has been difficult for you to make a connection between that glorious day when you said your vows before men and before God. And you prayed fervently for God to give you a greater marriage. And you find it difficult to make a connection between that and the mess that you are in right now in your relationship. And so what you do, you still believe that he's the Son of God, but you quit following him. You quit denying yourself. And even some of us follow our selfish desires and begin to engage in affairs because you want to meet your need. Or you're in a relationship with this guy. But this Jesus stuff is not important to him. In fact, he doesn't want to follow Jesus, because for him it's uncool. And so you begin to rationalize in your mind. And many of us do this. You're like, okay, Jesus, you're always going to be there, right? I'm not sure whether this person, and insert guy or girl, I'm not sure whether this person will always be there. So let me pursue this first, and then we'll come back to you. So we quit following Jesus because of our needs, our desires. Or you go to school, or you go to work, or you even move to a company where following Jesus doesn't matter. You're in an environment where people, in fact, they call themselves liberals. It's not that they don't believe Jesus exists. In fact, they probably believe that Jesus exists, but it just doesn't matter for them. In fact, they're intrigued by any new idea. So anything that comes their way, you find that, it's okay. We can go this way. And even, following Jesus has been perceived as uncool. So what do you decide? Because it doesn't matter in the environment that you are in. Let me do what the rest are doing. Let me stop following Jesus. Some of us, when we encounter unanswered prayers, we become angry that Jesus has not answered to our request. And Jesus, knowing our hearts and knowing our minds, is asking, not you too. Mavuno, I hope you're not planning on quitting on me too. Not you too. And that's what he's asking his disciples here. And in that moment, Peter, and you gotta love this guy. Peter, by the way, when you read the gospel, you have to love Peter. Peter, in this moment, says something that is very profound. In fact, I wonder I wonder if the disciples, just standing there, they're in a place, oh, well, that's a question already. I wonder whether the disciples just standing there, they were like, this guy, the last time he spoke, he said something that he started even rebuking Jesus. And Jesus gave him a good one back. But Peter asks this question. He says, Lord, to whom shall we go? To whom shall we go? To whom shall we go? So we quit on you. To whom shall we go? How do you say it in your mother tongue? Just share with the person sitting next to you. If you don't know, this is homework, by the way. To whom shall we go? How do you say it in your mother tongue? Unless you've come from Costo, your mother tongue is not Swahili. To whom shall we go? To whom shall we go? And Peter recognizes that if you choose not to follow Jesus, then you're choosing to follow someone else. That's what he recognizes. And who else shall we go to? If I choose to say no to Jesus, I am saying yes to someone else or something else. And yes, Lord, your teachings might be hard. They might be impossible. Sometimes we don't even know why we are following you. We don't even understand this thing that you're telling us about heaven. But if we stop following you, then what? Then who? Where are we going to? To whom shall we go? And friends, there will be times in your life that you will want to stop following Jesus. And I can guarantee you those moments will come. You will want to quit. And Peter is reminding us that before you make that decision, before you choose to step out of your relationship with Jesus, consider your options. Consider your options. What are the options that you have out there? Saying no to Jesus means that you're saying yes to someone else. And is that someone else worth it? Is that someone else worth it? Because look at what Peter says about the Jesus that you might be quitting on. He says this, you have the words of eternal life. Jesus, what you give, no one else can. What you are offering me, no one else is offering that. I remember when you called me and I was just a mere fisherman who was disillusioned, about to give up. But when you came into my life and suddenly everything changed and I became alive again. And Jesus realizes here that something has shifted in his life. My life felt like it had no meaning. But you invited me to be a part of something that is way much bigger than myself, bigger than anything that I could have ever imagined or even dreamed of. What can I compare that with, Lord? Fishing? The good, the old, same old? No. To whom shall we go? Jesus, you've given us an opportunity. You've given me an opportunity to live for something that is much bigger than my dreams. And I would rather die for something than live for nothing. So yes, this is not what I thought it will be. I thought by now we'll be living in royalty by the time that you are crowned as the King of Jews. But it seems like it's not going to happen that way. It doesn't seem to be it. But hey, what do I have to lose following you? What you have given me is far much better than where I was. To whom shall I go? And guys, this is our story. This is my story. There are seasons of my life when I've actually wanted to quit. When you go through certain seasons and you feel like, this is impossible. Jesus, it's too difficult. I don't even understand where we are going, first of all. I just feel like I'm blind. I don't even know where I'm going. And when you look into your life, when you go and meditate on this word, you will find that there are triggers, there are certain triggers that cause you or lead you to that place of quitting. For some of us, maybe it's loss, when you lose something or someone. For some of us, it's maybe unanswered prayers. And I know that has been one for me, where there are moments when I've prayed to God and I'm like, God, I consider these things that I'm asking you to be basics. So if you don't answer me now and I'm serving you, then how do you expect me to continue trusting and believing in you if you can't answer what seems to be basic for me? But friends, when I've considered my options, I've asked myself this question, maybe in different words, to whom shall I go? I'm telling you, there is no other better option out there. Friends, you've been invited to something that is far much greater than the insignificant lives and ambitions that we live for. You've been invited into one of the most amazing stories in the history of our world. The Savior of the world the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, the one who is above everything, the one whose name has been exalted above everything, the creator of heaven and earth, the creator of your life, who fearfully and wonderfully made and gave you all the abilities and the skills that you have to be able to do the things that you do today, has invited you to follow him and be part of his story from creation to eternity. And I ask you this question: is there anything or anyone that is more compelling and fulfilling than that? Is there anyone? Is there anything that is more compelling than what Jesus has offered to us? Yeah, that business will make you millions of dollars and you'll be able to enjoy the things that you want to enjoy in life. Then what? Yeah, fine, that man or that woman will give you the fulfillment that you want right now. Then what? Yeah, maybe to you, you think that, yeah, he's hot, I don't know, I should not be able to let them go. But here's the thing: are you going to say the same things 10 years from now about that person? Yeah, some of us are in the place where you're mourning. And with all due respect, and I know it's a difficult moment for you, but you choose to stop following Jesus, the person who understands your pain better than yourself. The person who's your comforter, your counselor, the person who has a track record of taking people through such situations, such seasons of life. You quit following Jesus so that you can follow who? Yes, your pain is immense, but so that you can follow who? Maybe he hasn't answered your prayer. Maybe he hasn't blessed your business. Maybe he hasn't given you that thing or that one that you've been praying for a very long time. But consider your options. So if you stop following him because of this one thing, then what? Mavuno, when you stop following Jesus, I can almost guarantee you that you will get to a time in your life when you wish you would come back to where you stepped out of this relationship. I'm telling you, I've spoken to many men and women. I have counseled many men and women who will say, I wish I can take back the hands of time. And this is what Peter is telling us. Peter is telling you and I, when the going gets tough, just before you make that decision to step out, consider your options. Because one day you will look back and you will wish that you chose differently. If not Jesus, then who? If not him, then who? Is there anyone else in this earth? Is there anyone else in your family who is inviting you to something that is way much bigger than yourself? Because if you choose to stop following Jesus because his teachings are difficult, or they are hard, or you don't even understand, or you choose to stop following Jesus because of unanswered prayers, I'm telling you that is a big mistake that you will live to regret for the rest of your life. It doesn't mean that he has changed. It doesn't mean that he loves you even less. It doesn't mean that he doesn't want to bless you. Following Jesus will cost you self. You will have to surrender your desires. You'll have to surrender and deny yourself. That is the reality. And I'm telling you, many churches will not teach you on this because of, there's that feel-good factor. But I'm telling you guys, this is the reality. This is what you find in the Bible. This is what you find in the word that we keep on reading here day after day. Following Jesus will cost you self. But choosing to stop following Jesus will cost you everything. To whom shall you go? The disciples were invited to be part of something that will not only change their lives, but change generations to come. They began what now we know as a church, and they've given us an opportunity where many of us can continue in this transformation. And I want to say this: if you want to leave a legacy that will last your lifetime, go ahead and do it by yourself, because you can. But after that, you're going to go with it to your grave. But if you want to leave a legacy that will last centuries, that your children's children and their children's children can be able to experience the goodness of God, then Jesus is inviting you to be part of something bigger. He's saying, come as you are, but know that your life will be transformed. In fact, that's the only caution that I'll give you. That when you come as you are, the reality is that your life will not be the same again. That God will transform your life. Come be a part of something that is far much greater than you will ever dream. Jesus is saying, come follow me. And Mavuno, this year, let us commit to follow Jesus. Let us keep coming back to church even if our prayers are not answered. I want to ask us that even as we are going into the year, whatever month it will be, however difficult it gets, let us look for opportunities where we can serve one another within this community. Even if He hasn't provided for you yet, let us look for those opportunities. Let us keep praying for our country, even if you can't see results yet. Let us keep doing the things that God will desire for us to do. Let us keep planting churches even when people continue to persecute the church. Because you and I know the transformation that we are going through. You and I know what God has called us to do. Let us keep doing good in this society. Let us keep spreading the love in this society, regardless of the pain and the agony that we continue to see in this nation and even across the world. Let us keep discipling people through Mizizi, through Ombi, through Ndoa, through Lea. Even if we cannot see their transformation yet, let us keep doing these things. Let us keep following Jesus, regardless of how inconveniencing it is to you. Mavuno, I ask, it doesn't matter how hard it gets, and everyone else around us is departing and unfollowing Jesus. Let us be the ones who are going to stand up and declare, to whom shall we go? Yes, fine, you don't want me to follow Jesus, but to whom shall we go? Because we have committed to following Jesus.